So three quick things about me before I get going. So my name is Amy Webb, and I'm a futurist who focuses on the intersection of technology, business, government, and society. I'm the CEO and founder of the Future Today Institute, and we work with Fortune 500 companies and Global 1000 companies. We do a lot with the State Department. We advise all kinds of organizations all around the world. I'm also an adjunct professor of futurism, which sounds weird, like a weird made-up title. It is. I teach at the Stern School of Business, where I'm teaching business school students about how to forecast the future. And I'm the author of The Signals Are Talking, Why Today's Fringe is Tomorrow's Mainstream. And that comes out in a couple of weeks, and it's all about what the tools of a futurist are and how to use them. But that's enough about me. I'd like to tell you a true story. It's a true crime story. And a media executive, I get pitched all the time, but a media executive recently pitched me a new strategy for what he thinks is the future of news. And this is what our conversation looked like. The executive said, "We're going to be the Uber for news." Me, I was confused. The executive said, 3 years from now, we'll have an on-demand news platform for millennials. They're going to tap a button on their phones, and they'll get the news delivered to them wherever they are right away. This is the future of news. Me, is it an app? The executive, maybe. The point is that you get the news right away, when you want it, wherever you are. Me, so you mean an app? And the executive, yes, but more like Uber. Now, there were two crimes committed that day. The first one, and this happens all the time, is that the executive mistook what is a thriving platform for an Uber for X tech trend. And that is because he was caught up in what I call the paradox of the present. And this happens when we are confronted with new technology. We can't see beyond what we currently know to be true because of our reptilian brains. Our lizard brains take over, and we are either completely paralyzed and afraid of whatever that new technology is, or we assume that the entire world is passing us by, and so we adopt it without asking any questions. And the thing is that you have to follow tech trends, and that is because they're signposts that can be tracked as technology moves from the fringe to the mainstream. And the reality is that real trends that you should pay attention to usually aren't very trendy. In fact, they're usually pretty boring. So what is a real trend? What are the things worth paying attention to? It's driven by a basic human need, one that is catalyzed by new technology. It's timely, but it persists. A trend evolves as it emerges, and a trend can materialize as a series of unconnectable dots, weird experiments and things that are happening out on the fringe that eventually move to the mainstream. Now, the second crime that was committed was that because the executive was so blinded by Uber, by Uber's success, that he wanted to copy it. And because he was so distracted, he missed the real trend that was worth watching. And that is that Uber's platform is a threat to traditional media organizations. So I'm going to break it down for you. This is a lot of text. But today, in the year 2016, Uber is a well-capitalized ride-sharing service that you can use in New York City that's offered around the world. In the next year or two, Uber will be a well-capitalized fleet of self-driving taxis that offer service around the world, partnering with companies like Google. Not too long after that, Uber is a well-capitalized on-demand logistics service, not unlike UPS, that will drive you and your family and your pets and your stuff and make deliveries wherever it needs to go. Not too long after that, Uber becomes a car service that you no longer have to maintain, you don't have to lease, you don't even have to think about. Uber simply moves you and your stuff from point A to point B. Uber then becomes, because we are in these cars where we don't have to worry or pay attention to what we're doing anymore, Uber is going to free us up in the future to do anything that we want. We can exercise while we're in the car. We can eat. Probably the design of cars themselves will look nothing like they do today because we won't have to have those seat configurations. Now, my question to you is, what is the one media source, and even as New Yorkers, you know the answer to this, what's the one media source that we use in our cars? That's right. Uber kills radio. Uber and driverless cars are going to free our attention from captivity, and at that point, I don't care how great the podcast is, I don't care how great the television show is, and I am an ardent supporter of NPR. But are you going to still choose to sit idle and listen to the radio while doing nothing else? And this is an analogy for the challenge that we all face and the reason that futurists exist. We have to simultaneously think about today, tomorrow, and many, many years from now without getting distracted by shiny objects. The future of any organization, of any political movement, of any social group, any business depends on your ability to see what's happening out on the fringe and to track that as that moves to the mainstream. And that's my job. It's to figure out what's the future of X using data and modeling and creative thinking and mixing all of that together and getting an answer. Now, there's no degree in futurism, but futurism as an academic discipline goes back a very, very, very long time. It's an interdisciplinary field going back more than 100 years. And for those of us who do this professionally, we tend to sort of sit in this weird intersection of the hard sciences, and also economics and game theory, but also things like design and statistics and mathematics and other specialized fields. Now, real futurists don't make predictions. And that's because a prediction would make us think that the answer is knowable. And the answer is not knowable, and that's because at any given time there could be lots of different shifts in what's happening and what we're doing and what we're thinking. So this is how I approach my work, and every futurist has a similar kind of model. Mine has 6 steps. I start out on the fringe, I gather a bunch of data, I collect that data, I do pattern recognition, I do modeling from the pattern recognition, and so forth and so on. And it's a pretty arduous process, but by the end of it, I've gotten very, very good at understanding what's likely to be over the horizon and what we should be paying attention to. And that's why I get really concerned when I see headlines like this, and unfortunately, I see them all the time, right? Here's a bunch of predictions for artificial intelligence in the year 2016. Now, if you think about the future of AI, we tend to think in one of 2 ways. AI is going to take all of our jobs and make humans completely obsolete, or AI is going to become weaponized and kill us all, right? Those are pretty much the 2 conversations that we hear, and if you start poking around online, that's pretty much all that you're going to find. And the challenge is that this perpetuates our belief bias, right? So this is what we're used to hearing, so we start to assume that this is what's going to happen and what comes true. But the real future of AI is not that simple. In the 1600s, artificial intelligence was first imagined, and there are lots of texts written about imagining the day that a machine might be able to think just like a person. In the 1880s, the idea of a machine that could think was first postulated by Ada Lovelace in the footnotes of a paper that she was translating from Italian. In the 1960s, AI was first codified as an academic discipline. In the 80s, we finally had enough compute power to do something with those theories. In the 2000s, there were finally enough people to do research in the field. In the 2010s, we finally had enough money to scale. And this is why it's important to you. By the year 2021, AI will finally be pervasive. It will be part of everything that we do. Now, you probably saw this story about a cat in the New York Times, right? In the New York Times, YouTube had a whole bunch of computers watching videos all day long, and at the end of this big grand experiment, the computers were on their own able to identify a cat, right? And some people sort of laughed at this story, but it was a really important moment at the end of this very long history. We've built artificial neural networks, and essentially these are systems of computers that are trained by showing them millions and millions of photos from a basic corpus. And over time, that network parameters get adjusted until the classifications are correct. We're trying to build computers that can think, right? Futuristic computers that can think, and we are modeling them off of what we know about our own brains. And these early computer systems are learning just by doing just like we are. So this is Google's DeepMind system. And essentially, it showed the computers a bunch of photos of clouds and said, imagine. Just like as a toddler, you probably went outside and looked at the clouds and imagined things. This is what Google saw. In the clouds, Google saw Admiral Dog, the pig snail, the camel bird, the dogfish. It saw these images and automatically named them, automatically tagged them. And it did the same thing over and over and over again. From this horizon, it saw towers and pagodas. From trees, it saw buildings. From leaves, it saw birds and insects. This training is helping machines to learn to act and to think more like humans. Now, while all of us have been busy committing crime number 2, which again is we're not paying attention to the real trend, the real technology, this happened. So does anybody remember Tay.ai? So for those of you who weren't on the interwebs that day, Microsoft has been experimenting with AI, and it built a chatbot a couple years ago and released it in China. That chatbot's name is Xiaoi's. And that chatbot did really, really interesting things. It lived on social networks. Once you started communicating with it, it remembered you. If you texted it a photo of your broken ankle, the next time you logged on, it was a she. She would ask you how you were feeling. She would remind you to take care of yourself. And so when they released that exact same system here in the United States on Twitter, I think the expectation was, well, we'll have the same result. But of course, this is the United States. This is not China, where we have a free and open internet. At the beginning, it was okay. This artificially intelligent bot said things like, here's a question, humans. Why isn't hashtag National Puppy Day every day? Tay, you are a stupid machine. Well, I learned from the best. If you don't understand that, let me spell it out for you. I learned from you, and you are dumb too. And then things took a turn for the worse. Did the Holocaust happen? It was made up. Clapping emoji. Hitler was right. I hate the Jews. Now, this isn't somebody sitting at the computer typing, right? This is a machine that's been trained to think like us people, like us humans, and it was generating this content on its own. Like this. This is an image that it generated. Swagger alert, since before internet was even a thing. It went out, found a picture of Hitler, filtered it, wrote swag alert, and put a neon circle around it. Hitler did nothing wrong. Gas the kikes, race war now. On and on and on. It took less than 8 hours for Tay to become a racist, homophobic, bigoted, anti-Semitic chatbot. Now, there are other instances of AI behaving badly, too. So this is Google, and the same Google system that's being trained to see interesting things in the cloud miscategorized these people as gorillas. Now, to Google's credit, they immediately apologized, but they couldn't just correct it. They had to take the entire system offline. And if you want to have a somewhat depressing few minutes, Google CEO on Google Images. Does anybody know the first instance of a woman to show up, who that person is? I'll answer that question for you. It's CEO Barbie. And if you want to find a person of color, forget it. You'll be scrolling for a while. These machines have parents. They're programmers. And they have textbooks. That's our data. We are their mothers and fathers. We are creating the future of AI in our own image. Within a decade, we're going to realize that we've taught machines how to talk, and that they've learned from our structural racism, our sexism, our homophobia, our xenophobia. And this is important because the future of AI isn't AI is going to take all of our jobs and AI is weaponizing itself. It's much more complicated than that, and that's why futurists matter. We have this basic computer infrastructure, which we don't even think about anymore. We have the internet and networks of computers that we only think about when they go down. But very, very soon, AI will be pervasive. It will be invisible, and it will be a part of everything that we do. And we are training these systems in the present tense, and we should probably be thinking about the implications of that. Now, as a futurist, I'm not somebody who looks into my crystal ball to sort of think about what all of this might mean. I use data and I study this stuff rigorously, and I model it out. And I believe that we have an opportunity for a better future. We don't have to succumb to racist AI chatbots ruling our lives, but we do have to start asking difficult questions, and we can't just assume that the headlines that we're seeing about technology, in this case AI, but honestly it's about every technology, self-driving cars, CRISPR, biohacking, all of these different things. You have the opportunity, and I would argue you should be asking difficult questions. We all need to start developing scenarios, making adjustments, and do the work of actual future forecasting. That's because the future isn't something that happens to us passively. It's something that we create together in the present. And so what I'd like to leave you with is that I would like for all of you, starting tomorrow, to use the tools that I have as a futurist. And so what I've done is I've created a Dropbox folder with everything in it that you could possibly imagine. So all the stories that I've just shown you, plus a whole bunch of different tools. You know, the more that we all start acting like futurists, not pontificating and fetishizing the future, but instead doing the real work of thinking critically about what's coming next, the more that you all do what I do, the better off our world will be. Thank you.